Good morning, dear colleagues.
Anche per fare altre, attività.
A very good morning to everyone. My name is Juy Ambani, and on behalf of ICCROM and its flagship program, First Aid and Resilience for Cultural Heritage in Times of Crisis, FAR, it is my honor to welcome you to the launch event for READY, Safeguarding Cultural Heritage from Disasters, Extreme Weather Events, and Complex Emergencies. I will be your moderator for the day. This groundbreaking pan-European initiative is conceived by ICCROM's FAR program and in partnership with the European Commission's Directorate General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture, DG EAC, and it is supported by the Creative Europe program of the European Union. In the next 2 hours, we will hear from distinguished experts, policymakers, and practitioners who will share their insights on the challenges and opportunities in managing risk to cultural heritage. From disasters to conflicts, we hope today's discussion will highlight the pathways for resilience, innovation, and collaboration through READY. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. This session is being held on Zoom and will be recorded. Please keep your microphones muted during the presentation. You're encouraged to use the chat feature to share comments or questions. We will have a dedicated question and answer session following panel discussions, and we would love to hear from you through other interactive exercises planned for the entire day. On that note, it is my pleasure to welcome ICCROM's Director General, Ms. Aruna Francesca Maria Gujral, to officially open the event and present the welcome note. Dear DG, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Juy. I'm so pleased to be with all of you today. So, distinguished guests, it is with great pleasure and a deep sense of purpose that indeed I address you today at the launch of ICCROM's groundbreaking initiative, READY, Safeguarding Cultural Heritage from Disasters, Extreme Weather Events, and Complex Emergencies. This ambitious initiative represents a collective effort to harness Europe's expertise, tools, and best practices by uniting professionals from heritage institutions, local communities, and disaster risk management sectors. Together, we aim to strengthen the resilience of cultural heritage in the face of mounting global challenges. Conceived by ICCROM through its flagship program, First Aid and Resilience for Cultural Heritage in Times of Crisis, this 3-year capacity building initiative is made possible by the European Commission Director General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture, DG EAC, and is financially supported by the Creative Europe program of the European Union. Thank you so much. The timing of this initiative could not be more critical. Extreme events driven by the climate crisis are escalating, threatening communities, ecosystem, and our cultural heritage worldwide, Europe included. In 2024 alone, devastating floods in Valencia impacted over 200 heritage sites, while wildfire ravaged cultural landscape in Greece. These are not isolated incidents, but part of a growing trend, putting not only monuments at risk, but the entire ways of life, traditions, and the knowledge passed down through generations. Amidst these challenges, Europe has made significant strides in developing cutting-edge tools, advancing geospatial technologies, and building capacities to safeguard heritage from extreme events. The READY initiative builds on this momentum. Over the next 3 years, READY will forge a resilience framework for safeguarding Europe heritage, integrating cultural heritage protection into disaster risk management, climate action, and peace-building efforts. READY will enhance local knowledge, build capacity, and empower communities to safeguard Europe's heritage for present and future generations. Through collaborative hands-on training and field action, we will establish a resilient network of trained risk managers and cultural first aiders across Europe. This will ensure that heritage is not only protected after crisis, but also integrated into climate resilience and disaster preparedness strategies and policies. This is a defining moment for us, a moment to ask critical questions. How can we enhance resilience, take early action, and develop innovative solutions to safeguard our shared heritage? How can we bridge gaps in capacity and forge cross-sector partnership to ensure heritage is protected now and for future generations? To give a concrete response to these critical queries, I call on governments, heritage professionals, emergency responders, and local communities to join us in these vital efforts, driving transformative changes in building climate and disaster resilience for heritage and the communities connected to it across Europe and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Director General, for those words, for an inspiring start to this event. With that, next we are honored to have Ms. Catherine Magnon, Head of Unit at the Director General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture of the European Commission, to share her opening remarks. Ms. Magnon, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see that this launch is gathering an audience which is extremely large. I saw greetings from a very far away country, just Australia now, or, South Africa. I think I saw Brazil. So it's absolutely wonderful. I would like to thank ICCROM's Director General, Aruna Francesca Maria Guzral, for her leadership, the great introduction that she gave, and also the project managers and the project directors that are giving and sharing their expertise to put this wonderful project together. Aparna Tandon, Jui Ambani, who's conducting this launch, and Mohana Chakraborty. They're wonderful, and they are really the key behind what will be, I'm sure, a great success. So why this project? Why this partnership with ICCROM, between the European Commission and ICCROM? It's sufficient to open our phones. I would say open a newspaper, but nowadays we read news on our phones. The geopolitical situation is difficult in Europe, but also in the world. There have been conflicts. There are conflicts in Europe that we think we would not see, and yet they are there. And we're seeing also the effects of climate change with the devastating floods very recently in Spain, or the wildfires in Greece or Portugal, the floods in Germany and Belgium, the repeated earthquakes in Croatia. So clearly, we have to get our act together and make sure that we can protect cultural heritage in the best possible way. That's the reason for this project, to build capacities, strengthen resilience of cultural heritage institutions, first aiders when it comes to complex emergency situations. That's why this project. Now, why ICCROM? Well, clearly ICCROM is a trusted partner with an amazing experience in the field, ISO certified training courses, and a very well-established methodology. We also had a very successful project and cooperation with ICCROM in Ukraine recently, where ICCROM, with our financial support, trained a team of first aiders who already managed to save more than 100 icons, and amongst many other amazing achievements. So that was a very successful and positive experience that we want to build on now, and we want to expand this project to all European countries and in the neighborhood, so all countries belonging to the Creative Europe program. We also want this project to be, when we conceived it, when we fought for the budget internally, we made sure that the project could build and over several years, because we know that, if you do something for a few weeks or a few months, you cannot have very lasting results. So the project will last for 3 years, and will include amongst its delivery mechanisms, amongst its elements, a cascading factor whereby trainers will be trained, so that the project can live also beyond the mere duration, the financial and administrative duration. Even though it's for 3 years, we still want it to have a longer legacy. I also want to mention that we have other projects also working on emergency situation and resilience of cultural heritage. And one in particular called ProCulture has a network in several member states, and they will be also their methodology and some of their conclusions will also be used, of course, in this training organized by ICCROM. So we are full of hope for this project. It's a project that is important to the member states of the EU. There was a request for such a project in the framework that guides our cooperation within the EU. That's called, the nickname or the way it's called is the EU Work Plan for Culture. Safeguarding cultural heritage is a prominent feature of this work plan. And we are implementing it in many ways. We've been supporting Ukraine in particular with many different actions. But now we want to make sure that we can strengthen the capacities of the countries that belong to Creative Europe, 40 European countries, to respond to complex emergency situations. So hence this project, we are very, very happy that today is the launch. All the teams work very hard, but again, in particular, ICCROM's team, Aparna, Jui, and Mohana, and we are very grateful and we look forward to what will now happen in practice. I hand over the floor back to you, and I thank you, and I'm delighted to be part of today's event. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Magnon, for your words of encouragement, your partnership, and your unwavering support. We are now ready to move to our most exciting panel discussion of the day, and the theme is Managing Extreme Risks to Heritage. Are we ready? Our esteemed panelists will delve into strategies for safeguarding cultural heritage in the face of increasing disasters and conflicts. To lead this discussion, I would like to welcome to the floor Ms. Aparna Tandon, Senior Program Leader for ICCROM's flagship program, First Aid and Resilience for Cultural Heritage in Times of Crisis, as well as Sustaining Digital Heritage. A note for the audience, we will have an interactive background quiz on Mentimeter. Instructions to participate and share your thoughts will be pasted in the chat. We invite your perspectives, your knowledge, and your ideas. And if you have any questions, as I mentioned in the beginning, we will have a dedicated Q&A session where that can be addressed. With that, I welcome now Ms. Tandon to take over.
Thank you, Juhi. And thanks to our Director General and Ms. Magnon for their inspiring words and encouragement. Greetings to all. As the year draws to a close, many of us are looking ahead to new beginnings and opportunities. Yet, while we remain hopeful for a brighter future, the challenges of our times are undeniable. The climate crisis is intensifying, with 2024 marking the hottest summer on record for Europe and rest of the world. According to European Environmental Agency, over 370,000 hectares of forests were destroyed in the first 9 months of 2024. Around 2 million people across Central Europe were affected by the severe flooding in September alone. And as Catherine mentioned, floods in Valencia in October killed 230 people, destroying homes and businesses, as well as damaging over 200 heritage places. Meanwhile, the ongoing conflicts in Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, and several other places serve as stark reminders of the vulnerabilities of our communities and their cultural heritage. Against this backdrop, ICCROM is launching Ready, Safeguarding Cultural Heritage from Disasters, Extreme Weather Events, and Complex Emergencies, in partnership with European Commission's Directorate General for Education, Youth, Sport, and Culture, and which is funded by Creative Europe program of the European Union. Ready seeks to address pressing questions. Do we have the necessary capacities to protect cultural heritage and the communities it serves from frequent extreme weather events and complex crises? Are European institutions ready to safeguard heritage collections, sites, and cultural bearers in times of conflict? What are the key indicators that demonstrate the effectiveness of disaster risk management for cultural heritage? And in turn, how can we harness heritage processes to reduce disaster risk, promote sustainable peace, and build resilience? And finally, how can we utilize the tools, good practices, and the latest technologies developed by European institutions to respond effectively to these challenges and set a community and create a community of practice for the rest of the world? To gain insight into these critical challenges, we are joined today by an esteemed panel of experts and heritage practitioners. Throughout the discussion, we will also open polls, as already informed by Juhi, my colleague, to gather audiences' perspectives on emerging needs for disaster risk management of cultural heritage. Without further ado, it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce our distinguished panelists. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Cristina Portales, who's a professor at the Department of Computer Science of the University of Valencia in Spain. And she's the Director of Research Team, DINA, Data Interaction and Augmentation. She also coordinates the Cheminova project, an international consortium aimed at developing smart technologies for safeguarding heritage in the face of climate change and conflict. And it's a project funded by EU, and ICCROM is one of the participating organizations. Joining her is Alvaro Solbas Garcia, who's a lecturer for History of Art degree program, as well as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Valencia, and he also works with the Cheminova project. Next on our panel is Stefan Mikalski, who's a renowned heritage scientist with over 40 years of experience in preventive conservation and risk management for cultural heritage. At the Canadian Conservation Institute, he partnered with ICCROM in Rome to create training programs and authored manuals like the ABC Risk Assessment Methodology, which is used internationally to assess and manage risks to various forms of heritage. Joining Stefan is also Lucia Leca. She's a key member of the World Heritage Department at the National Institute of Heritage in Romania. Lucia is deeply involved in the management and protection of World Heritage sites, including the historic city center of Sighișoara, ensuring its preservation and enhancement for future generations. Elke Selter is also on our panel. She's a programs director for ELIF, and she holds a PhD in politics and international studies from SOAS in London. Elke has been conducting research and also teaching widely on the topics of international communities' post-conflict engagement with heritage and repatriation of collections. Arminia Shachitano is the senior advisor on multilateral affairs in the Ministry of Culture of Italy. She's a conservation architect and cultural policy expert with over 20 years of experience at national, international, and EU levels. And with her, we also have Hyeong Oh, an Associate Program Management Officer at UNDRR's Regional Office for Europe and Central Asia in Brussels, Belgium. As the regional focal point for Making Cities Resilient 2030 initiative, she monitors UNDRR's engagement with UN country teams in the region, and she also coordinates collaboration with issue-based Coalition on Environment and Climate Change. Jasna Popovic is the head of Conservation Department in Trogir at the Ministry of Culture and Media in Croatia. Her focus on heritage risk management was enhanced after participating in ICCROM's Prevent course in 2021, and she has since then led various initiatives bridging civil protection and cultural heritage sectors. She's also part of a national work group developing a strategy for heritage risk management. Clearly, as you can see, we have a distinguished panel with a wealth of diverse expertise. And with that, let's open the floor for questions. And my first question is for Cristina and Alvaro. They are going to jointly answer as they have been involved in the post-flood rescue efforts for cultural heritage. So my question is, in the immediate aftermath of the floods in Valencia, what challenges did you encounter in mounting responses to rescue and recover heritage?
So,
Over to
hello.
you.
Yes, so first of all, thank you so much for inviting us to this webinar. So we are really happy to be here. So to answer your questions, so the truth is that we face several challenges in providing a quick and effective response. Firstly, accessing the affected areas was really complicated, especially in the first days following the tragedy, as many roads and communication routes were severely impacted. So it was also not easy to find temporary storage and drying areas. So another major challenge in providing an adequate response to the rescue of cultural heritage was the scale of the affected area. So additionally, the first days, the priority was to rescue and stabilize the affected people and provide them with minimal living conditions. For instance, in many municipalities, residents lacked electricity, telephone, communications, and water. And on top of this, there was a delayed response from public administrations. So in fact, the first aid, like food, drinking water, machinery to remove vehicles, and so other things, arrived thanks to volunteers from nearby municipalities. So you can imagine all the infrastructure, such as bridges and tunnels, were damaged, making it difficult to access all kinds of supplies, war materials, tools, consumables. So this was the first aid. So this was the main emergency that we had. First, the people, and then, of course, trying to rescue all cultural heritage that was severely also damaged.
Okay. And do you have any examples of direct examples of what challenges were encountered by cultural heritage institutions, like in getting to the sites and rescuing heritage?
Yes, I think maybe Alvaro can answer this.
Yeah.
This
Yes.
question. There was a lot of things that were really damaged, and objects, and particularly cultural heritage, everything that was on the ground floor, basically.
Okay. Okay. So that gives a very clear picture and of the challenges and how difficult it was to get to the places that were affected. With that, I move on to Stefan. Stefan, listening to Cristina, what do you think? Do you think that extreme risk events such as the fires in Hawaii or the floods in Valencia, though rare and difficult to predict, are adequately addressed by current risk assessment methods that are being used within our heritage sector?
Yes, thank you for this invitation, Aparna, and the Director General of ICCROM. Let me shorten your question, Aparna, which is rather complicated. Are the methods adequate for all of the risks like the floods? I think the methods are adequate. Obviously, I spent 10 or 15 years developing one of them for the heritage sector, and I like to think that it was useful work. But from my experience implementing, and also just generally being an advisor to Canadian museums and writing things for the globally, the methods are there, but they're not widely applied. And I think this is true throughout the risk management sector. I haven't seen anything in our sector that's substantially different, really, in terms of methodology and issues of risk perception. So I think there are two reasons that they're not applied. And the first one is global, which is a risk perception issue that some of the speakers will be addressing as well. And that applies to large and small institutions. It's very difficult for people to believe something that might happen, or what technically you would call a probabilistic or a stochastic issues. Humans were really not well designed to think about those. And even if they do think about them, the question of whether people will act on their knowledge or their advice is even more difficult, because humans will tend to act on what's in their face day by day, the regular routine of the job. No matter how intellectual we try to make some of our functions, the day-to-day reality, like remembering to get your Zoom screen set up and make sure the mute's not on, that just occupies so much of our minds. So how do we get past that that hurdle? So the second reason for large institutions is just a general lack of, well, lack is a bit harsh. It's very difficult to do what gets called integrated management. If it were easy to do, we wouldn't have invented the phrase in order to teach it in management courses or in projects or whatever. So large institutions, the different professions and expertise are siloed. They're not necessarily being integrated. And we will have speakers speaking to that. I mean, this project's very much about trying to integrate into it. But we come back to people's day-to-day existence in a large heritage institution, whether it's a museum or a heritage site. We have often been asked to give the risk course that ICCROM and CCIA collaborated on for 10 years. It would generally be the conservation community that would ask for it, which is great and which is sad, because it means that these people are not necessarily the VIPs in the organization. They're not necessarily influencing senior management very much. So it's a question of the people that actually are worried about risk and do want to do assessments for the museum. They have to overcome a hurdle within their organization that this be taken seriously and that resources be given. And for museums and art galleries that I've been more focused on, although the method applies to immovable and movable and virtual and whatever, it's difficult to get up through the senior management to say, okay, we're going to ask other members of staff to work together as a team. And there's lots of great talks and books on how to do teamwork and to integrate and to do it. But my experience has been that those will fall back into place. There's a kind of inertia in large organizations and in human social structures to go with the status quo. So that's my long response to whether the methods are there. The methods are there. The implementation is lacking. So that I've tried to say why I think the implementation is difficult. So when you're going to be training trainers, they need to be pragmatists and optimists, because they're going to run into those walls over and over.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you. That was a very comprehensive answer. And also, I really liked what you said, that the methods are there. So we often blame them. There's a lack of methodology. There's a lack of methodology. The methods are there. They're not applied, and they're not applied widely because of so many of these reasons that you mentioned, the inertia, the day-to-day problems, teams.
Now that you've said it that way, I would add, to be fair, And this again, I learned from risk trainers that approached us, or we asked them at CCI 20 years ago, people who are expert on various ISO risk committees for health and food safety, that when you do risk management, the tools range on a spectrum from very easy to apply and very imprecise and not necessarily reliable, all the way to the other end, which is very precise, very accurate, incredibly labor intensive, and unlikely to be applied unless you have a big budget and computers. And so you try and find a sweet spot in the middle where it's realistic for people to think about it a few days a year and to apply it and then act on it, versus being something that's so generalized and yeah, it tells you the banal, floods are bad, fires are bad, we should probably be ready for it. But to make that a slightly more precise, Irene Karsten at the CCI has taken some of their comprehensive risk assessments and looked at them for a pattern. And the reason she wants to find a pattern is to do an audit list, a checklist, which people like to apply. And there's lots of checklists. There's whole books on checklists from ICCROM. But the checklists don't have any weighting. They don't tell you what's important. You know, bicycle racks are up there with fire safety alarms. So there's no sense of proportion. So that's what rational risk management tries to do, is to say what is proportionally the priority. So in terms of the Valencia floods, I don't want to sound dismissive, but what Irene has already found in her checklist is if you are in a significant floodplain, and unfortunately civilization does try to build cities in floodplains because that's where the transportation and water was, then you're at high risk. And I was very happy. I mean, I knew I was going to pull it up. When the mention of Valencia, everything on the first floor. It's been 30 years we've been saying to small muses in Canada, if you're near a river or flood or whatever, you should have a little plan about what you're going to carry from the first floor to the second floor if you have a second floor. And that is so simple and so effective. And honestly, I can't say that the majority of museums in Canada have implemented it. So then it comes back to timing. I went back and read some of the news stories on the Valencia floods, and it was very much about timing. So even if you had a plan to move things to the next floor, if you've got 5 minutes head warning, then it's no good.
Stefan, we're going to interrupt you there, but I thank you for those insights. Very important points there. We're going to come back to them. But now I'm going to cross-check with Lucia from Romania, who's a heritage practitioner. And we're going to widen the perspective a bit and ask her what, in her efforts to improve disaster risk management for World Heritage Sites in Romania, what key challenges and capacity gaps she has identified, and we'll see if they match with some of what you have been saying, and what type of training would be most effective for heritage professionals. So over to you, Lucia, and please do, if you can, refer to some of what also Stefan was saying. It would be good for our audiences and for us to hear. So.
Okay. First, thank you very much for your invitation. And also I'm grateful that today we have the representative of the institutes and departments of the Ministry of Internal Affairs from Romania with us. And it is their merit and their colleagues that today we have in Romania an updated policy framework dedicated to disaster risk reduction. And I'm now referring to the National Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, for example, or strategies dedicated to different hazards, for example, for floods or earthquakes, and also to projects, for example, low risk project dedicated to risk assessment. And of course, that despite we have this, let's say, national policy, there are gaps in implementing different measures regarding the preparedness and response in case of hazard and multiple hazards. And for this reason, it is very important to involve professional practitioners and public institutions, and also private actors and NGOs. Finally, in July this year, the National Strategy for Disaster Risk Reduction got in force, and the cultural heritage in this document, it's very pointed out. We raise now the question, how do we implement actions at local, regional, and national level for all the phases and for the management of risk reduction, and for all the types of cultural heritage, immovable, movable, and intangible. And regarding the steps that I made for Sighișoara, the historical center of Sighișoara, one of the World Heritage sites from Romania, I tried to make these first steps for DRM plan. And the main gap identified was the lack of data that we actually have. So, for example, for flood, because we are talking about the medieval citadel placed on top of the hill, which has at the base an urban fabric from the 19th century and a river. And for example, in case of the flood, we don't know how many buildings have basements and which are the most exposed due to the proximity with to the water source. Or in case of fire, can fire truck get very fast to the building in the citadel with narrow streets? And in both cases, of course, that the general question is which are actually the most valuable components to protect and how to act. Thank you very much for mentioning that the methodologies exist, but we actually do not implement. And we should actually start to adapt at national level all the methodology that were developed at European level, and to implement as an instrument, as a mechanism applied to different sites. And I think the main challenge is to involve the stakeholders. Because some of the stakeholders actually don't have time or don't have interest to implement these type of measures, or perhaps they are not actually aware of the importance of this. And in terms of trainings, for all the stakeholders to get the common ground, it is important to understand the terminology, to get familiar with the existing international databases dedicated to different hazards, for example, or what type of data and or how accurate these data are, and how can we improve and gather more. To participate on different drills, it is very important to understand the procedures and the process, and not at least to plan and test the first aid procedures. So I hope I answered to the question.
Thank you, and more. You actually highlighted very important gaps, like the lack of data, the need to involve key stakeholders, and also adapting the methodologies to specific sites, as well as the training and the testing of first aid and making them, specific to sites. So I think very important points altogether. And clearly there are convergences and there are experiences that we have to highlight. And Thank you. Thank you for that question. And moving on, I would like to now add to the risks that we have been discussing so far. We've been talking about natural hazard events.
Thank you.
And I will move to Elke Selter, who is specializing in assessing conflict risks, who's specialized in assessing conflict risks for cultural heritage and has been working a lot in post-conflict situations. So Elke, my question to you is, what are the key gaps in capacities for effectively protecting cultural heritage during armed conflicts? And would training the armed forces address the gap in capacities? Over to you, Elke, and please refer to the European context in your answer.
Thank you, Aparna. My first point, maybe not so much a capacity one, but I think kind of underpinning everything else, especially in Europe, in kind of my experience, is that when it comes to conflict, either awareness or ability, willingness within our sector to properly prepare is very low, much lower than other regions of the world in which I've been working. And that's for large parts of Europe. Of course, the more you move to the Ukrainian border, the higher the awareness becomes. But there's large parts of Europe where the idea that conflict is an actual reality that we need to prepare for tends to be very low, which means there's very little preparedness within institutions, within sites, within governments responsible for cultural heritage. And there's also a knowledge gap, I think. Knowledge gap in the sense, and we've been advocating for this on the disaster end of the spectrum for many decades now, but I think the conflict end is really lagging behind. There's no linking or very little linking of our sector with experts in security management, in conflict analysis, and all this kind of sectors who can inform institutions about what the real risks of conflict today are. I mean, it's no longer just, I'm coming from Belgium, it's no longer an invasion coming from the east and us going down the trenches, probably. There's many different forms of conflict, and they're all very, I think, they're all very concrete, and they may all affect our institutions. Just as an example, one of the key preparedness measures that we've developed over the last years is everything related to digital inventories, 3D, everything kind of technology-based. I think in terms of cyber warfare and all of that, there's a very high risk involved in that as well. And these things really need to start being properly linked also in emergency preparedness plans, especially for institutions. So that in terms of the knowledge, I took on Stefan's comment that the methods are there, it's the implementation lagging behind. I think that's somewhat true also for conflict, but I do think that the methods are definitely a lot more developed for some parts of the sector than for others. We have experience for institutions, for collections, we know how to prepare, we know how to work in first aid. That's already much more difficult for built heritage. I mean, what do you really do when something comes under threat in terms of a building or an archaeological site, for instance? It's not at all developed, to my knowledge, for intangible heritage. We're really lagging behind there. We don't prepare, we don't know how to properly do first aid. There's little bits and pieces, but I really think there's a bulk of work that still needs to be done there. And then as a final point, and maybe I'm moving very much into the ALIF realm of work there, is who's going to pay for this? I think the reality is we need to prepare, our institutions need to prepare, the risk is real, we need plans, we need scenario-based plans on different conflict risks. All of that costs a lot of money. I started with awareness, but I think sometimes even institutions that are aware just do not have the ability to properly prepare, because unfortunately we're also in a sector where whenever government funding is cut, it's cut in the culture sector. And so we need to think as Europe, I think, of a kind of preparedness fund for institutions where, and these are not big projects, where sources can be provided to our main museums, to our main archives, our libraries, our massive cultural heritage sites or historic cities to prepare better for a risk that's really very concrete. And I think these, when it comes to conflict, are my key points. You also had a second point there on does training military help? I think training can never hurt. The better people are prepared, the better. I think especially in terms of not doing damage, it's important to train military. In terms of what they can do during an active conflict, that's probably very limited because I assume they'll be otherwise occupied. I would hope they are otherwise occupied in terms of war. Although, I mean, we have seen positive experiences with these cultural heritage officers within militaries, for instance. So I do think there's also things to be done on that field. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, LK. This was very helpful because what you have said is there's a huge range there from lack of awareness to finances for preparedness, tools that are specific to assessing conflict risks, as well as managing risks, and for intangible heritage, living traditions, practices, cultural bearers. What do? We definitely need a different approach. And thank you for that. And I hope we'll keep these points in the forefront as we move on with this discussion. And we'll come back to you for some more insights. And that takes me to, I'll now move on to our next panelist, Armenia Shakitano, who's a policymaker. And I think it perfectly dovetails with what you were saying, LK. But my question to Armenia is something slightly even more difficult, I'd say. Armenia, as a policymaker, what do you perceive as the key gaps in understanding the value of cultural heritage in promoting disaster risk reduction and sustainable peace? One aspect is to protect cultural heritage. The other aspect is the instrumentality of cultural heritage. Cultural heritage itself can be a valuable resource for reducing some of the risks we have been talking about and engendering social cohesion and also bringing in peace. So what do you have to say, Armenia?
Well, thanks for the invitation. It's really an amazing experience. The audience is so broad, really congratulations, and thanks ICCROM, DG for offering this opportunity also for debate. And thanks for a good question, because indeed, I think that one of the key aspects, and also can respond to the discussion that we already had, is that we still need to be to pursue one important goal. It is promoting cultural heritage as a repository of successful innovation. Not just a list of objects, not something which society, it's a nice to have for society. It is essential for humankind. And it is essential for humankind because cultural heritage testifies and embeds the successful innovation that humankind has produced, and it's worth to be passed to future generations. Presenting cultural heritage as innovation and not just something from the past, I think is crucial. Because, of course, you have a repository of important resources, precious for humankind to be protected, as we were discussing, but also embedded wisdom and knowledge, including in facing disasters and emergencies and climate crisis. Think of how much traditional knowledge it is embedded on cultural heritage, and we still do not exploit this traditional knowledge, which is now urgent to exploit because we need to identify solutions fast due to the fast advancement of climate change. So I think the third element that we should promote more is there is a cost for non-action. too often we are requested, how much does it cost? How much preparedness costs? Well, non-action, it's even more expensive. We've seen now what happened with the Notre Dame, which just in one night was destroyed by a fire suddenly. And then 5 years, extraordinary work, exceptionally carried on, but how much does it cost for our society? So it's difficult for the government, for the member states to address those issues, because it was said very well. I just go back to in 2018 when I was at the European Commission. We managed to organize a very important overview, which I think it's important resource for us on called safeguarding cultural heritage from natural and man-made disaster. I think that was the time, apparently, when we met the first time, preparing this important overview. And two key elements were addressed in this overview. Why we cannot advance, we do not advance. Integration of disaster risk management for cultural heritage, which has its own area of development, but it's not integrated in the national governance on disaster risk management. And we have had huge advancement with the Proculture work, which also was also happened also to the contribution of ICCROM, supported by DG ECO. And I think it's important to rely on the methodology and what has been produced by this network, which has integrated practices in the Union Civil Protection Mechanism, and it's a key target stakeholders, of course. And the other element, maybe we can discuss more, and there are some representatives, so here I'm very curious, is how to use and exploit results of research into the everyday practice. I've seen so many important projects funded by the European Union, funded by international organizations, producing tools, producing strategic documents that then, at the end of the project, are there and no one uses them. And even us as a Ministry of Culture, sometimes we even don't know that the tool exists and it's ready to be used. I think this is an important thing that we should discuss, how we can make use of the research already produced, and also how to ensure that the future research responds to the missing the questions and the gaps that we are continuously identifying.
Armenia, here, if I may, very quickly, I was thinking as you were speaking, recently we've had some experience with our Net Zero Heritage for Climate Action project, where we carried out an implementational research. It was like exactly exploiting the potential of heritage to reduce risks, disaster risks, promote climate change adaptation, and peace building. It's these kind of projects where you need to actually fund cultural heritage institutions, something what Elke was saying. These are not very big projects. The grants that we gave were around 15,000 euros for each institution to implement some of these key ideas that exist in the research that have been result of European research or elsewhere from other parts of the world, but never put into practice. So my question to you is, why do not the governments, which are struggling with it and not giving enough funding for this smaller level implementation for cultural heritage institutions, why this gap? I mean, you certainly gave some of the reasons, but as a government, as a policymaker who's working with the Ministry of Culture, wouldn't this be simpler to just give some grants to institutions to develop these kind of projects and upscale some of the results?
I think the governments are very active in this sense. The question is to reach the critical mass to ensure that there's a systemic change. I think that all the projects we are involved in several EU-funded projects. We contribute to the development of those tools. We use those tools. We use advanced technologies. We cooperate. The question is how to achieve systemic change. How
Yes.
to this to become not just an exception, but usual practice? How to embed those practices in the everyday institutional work? I think this is a crucial. The government are supporting many of those initiatives, and so we are here. We were part of several EU-funded projects and also international projects. But the question is how to ensure that we connect the dots every day when we sit at our desks.
That's the key. So maybe we can also put this question to the audience and we can come back to that. But thank you, Armenia. Thank you for those insights. We're going to get back to you and, get some more insights. And now I would like to pose the question to Young from UNDRR. Young, how does the disaster resilience scorecard, along with cultural heritage addendum, under the Making Cities Resilient initiative of UNDRR, which you coordinate, contribute to building capacity for effective disaster risk management in the context of cultural heritage? And for our audience, I would just like to explain that the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Institute for Disaster Risk Reduction has also put forward Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, to which many countries have, almost all countries have of UN member states have endorsed. And this Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction has recognized cultural heritage and its contribution to reducing disaster risks, and has also highlighted the need for protecting cultural heritage. And Yekyong is heading one of the initiatives of UNDRR, which is Making Cities Resilient. So within that, there is a disaster resilience scorecard. So over to you, Yekyong.
Thank you very much, Aparna, for the great question, and thank you for having me for this very important and interesting event. So yeah, as the regional focal point for this MCR 2030 initiative, I'm very happy to have a chance to talk about this scorecard and addendum. So this disaster resilience scorecard for cities and its thematic addendums, it offers a robust framework for cities to assess their disaster resilience. And it also is structured around, as you mentioned, UNDRR's 10 essentials for making cities resilient. And it provides local governments with a clear set of assessments to evaluate their preparedness and identify gaps and monitor progress in implementing the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. So cultural heritage, both tangible and intangible, has significant potential in disaster risk reduction and promoting sustainable development. So recognizing this, the cultural heritage addendum was created to integrate cultural heritage considerations into DRR agenda and resilience strategies. So it supports cities in developing culture-based and people-centered DRR strategies that align with broader heritage and development policies. So we have a great example of this in action, actually, Venezia of Italy, so which is one of the MCR 2030's resilience of cities. Venice, they hosted the first workshop in our region in Europe using this cultural heritage addendum with UNDRR support. So Venice is one of the MCR resilience hub, and resilience hub means resilience hub is the championing city that has been recognized in the MCR 2030 network for its committed role in mentoring other cities and also for critical role in DRR and urban resilience building agenda. So during this workshop, we conducted this workshop with a variety of stakeholder groups, including academia, NGO, and they identified critical areas for improvement and emphasized the also the urgency of mitigating risks to cultural heritage, especially with increasing climate-related disasters. And while the scorecard and addendum, they are not standalone or exhaustive tools, I want to say that the scorecard and addendum, they not only facilitated risk assessment and action planning, but also they created a good platform for meaningful dialogue with this different group of stakeholders. So Venice also prepared a result report of this workshop in consultation with UNDRR, which will be available online very soon. And I want to say that this process so reinforced the need for continued collaboration and knowledge exchange with other cities, which aligns perfectly with the objectives of the MCR 2030 initiatives. So by leveraging tools like the scorecard and the data addendum, we can ensure that cultural heritage remains an integral and protected component of urban resilience strategies. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing with us Making Cities Resilient initiative and its tools such as the Cultural Heritage Addendum. I hope we can put it in chat. My colleagues can put it in chat for those who do not know about it. And that Venice in Italy has a resilience hub and has carried out first workshop also with stakeholders is exemplary. But as Armenia was also saying, that governments are investing in it, but we need to make it more widely known so that more cultural heritage institutions can have access. And as Lucia was saying, having access to data is a very big problem, and engaging stakeholders, both of what you have mentioned. And I hope that UNDRR, with its global reach, can help in filling in these gaps and also seconding the work, supporting the work of local governments. So with that, I actually move on to the coming to the end of this round of questions with Jasna Popovic from Croatia. Jasna, you're the final panelist who's like to intervene, but you're not the as we say, we save the best for the last. So we come to you, with many questions. Our question to you is that you have been working to improve coordination between firefighters and the mayor's office in Trogir. You've also heard about Pro-Cult Hair initiative, which was highlighted by Catherine and also by Armenia. In Croatia, you have been trying to build this partnership. What are the main challenges and opportunities you have encountered, and what lessons you have to share with our audience?
Oh, do we have enough time? Well, first of all,
you have a very short time.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this launch of this very important initiative. Yes, as you said, the city project within the historic city of Trogir, which is a UNESCO site, which we started with the help of ICCROM, the Public Fire Brigade and the local authorities, was so successful that actually turned into, it brought national attention. And as Stefan said, we at the end had the support of all the VIPs. So it turned into a couple of national initiatives. We got the political support, we got the financial support, but the biggest challenge, and this was, I think, at the end of 2022 or, throughout the 2023, was the fact that we just didn't have, how to put it, enough pair of hands to carry everything out. And at that point, I felt that the cultural heritage field was sort of lulled in this comfort zone of not reaching out to other fields like the climate change science, the fire safety professional, the civil protection agencies. And even if there was enough awareness that we needed to do something, there was not enough, let's say, enough motivation to take a more active role in disaster risk reduction processes. And then finally, something that I've been aware of all along, but that hit me in the face pretty hard less than a month ago when a fire broke out on a nationally valuable monument in the area of my jurisdiction, is the fact that even if you've done your homework, which I feel I have, at least to a certain extent, because we've included all the stakeholders, the firefighters, the Directorate for Civil Protection, local, regional, national agencies. We've done work with the citizens, so we've involved the community through different workshops. We don't have the legal framework to implement all the protocols that we've developed. And so just, you know, two things that happened, for instance, when the fire broke out and I came to the scene, even though some police officers from the city police station had taken part in our workshops and were aware of all the projects, the officer in charge would not allow me to enter the secure perimeter. And what I needed to was actually talk to the firefighter, the commander, and to decide whether we needed to evacuate something. So for her, I was just a civilian. And then the second really frustrating moment happened the day after, when the forensic team came. And for them, evacuation of cultural heritage, I mean, it's just removing the evidence, potential evidence, right, that they need to go through. So that was the second thing that needed to be negotiated, and we've done it successfully. But to actually end in a more optimistic note, I'm very happy to say that Croatia has adopted new law on protection of cultural heritage, which addresses this issue. So the biggest challenge will be, and for me, this is something that I'm looking forward to draft regulations that will actually provide this legal framework that will say who is who, what our responsibility is in managing cultural heritage in times of crisis. We have about 6 months to draft these regulations, test them, and then they should be adopted by the end of 2025. And I think that for us, it's going to be a huge step forward. So going back to that year 2022 and 23, where nothing was happening, and you know, it was so frustrating. Now everything is moving forward so quickly, and we have more and more people on board, and it's just a very exciting time and very good time to be part of disaster risk reduction in Croatia, with the help of all the international community.
So, well, it's good to be part of the disaster risk management initiatives in Croatia, but I think these are all interesting times that we are living through. Not everything is dark and bleak. There is a hopeful note, and that we have heard from several of our panelists today. All of them have shared issues, problems with us, but they have also given us hope. And well, hope is audacious. And with that, I guess we also have to listen to what our audiences have been saying. And my team has been, and I see our chat is very active. We have questions. People are very, very interested and engaged. And we were also running some polls. So Juhi, Mohana, do you have some information for us at this first round of questions?
Yes, I think it would be interesting to also see what our audience has been putting in the interactive activity that we have been running while our speakers were talking. So Juhi, would you like to share the results?
Absolutely. I will just share my screen. It is wonderful to see the kind of commitment that our participants have and the insights they had to share for each of the panelists. So our first question to them was, what are some of the challenges heritage institutions face when responding to large-scale emergencies? And I believe the highest still remains at limited capacities and trained professionals, which is something that hopefully we will be able to tackle with READY. Lack of coordination among relevant stakeholders, lack of funding, limited access to real-time data, lack of adequate emergency response plan is also quite high, close to the limited capacities. On the other side, in this question, we had a lot of comments that unfortunately we're not able to see, but overall, on the scale of 1 to 5, how prepared our audience, which today is close to 230 people, think your heritage institution is for rare but extreme disaster, the overall score comes to 1.5 out of 5, which is also quite low. For the next question, we had what are some of the topics that should be covered while training diverse professionals to protect heritage? And the highest score goes to communicating with decision makers to integrate heritage concerns into DRM and meaningfully engaging communities and maintaining relationships with them. However, all the topics that were listed have gotten some traction, including managing climate-induced risk to heritage, approaching emergency responders and DRM specialists, and budgeting and cost-benefit analysis for recovery of heritage, all of which are topics we do aim to address through our training in READY. This was one of the more interesting answer session where audience truly engaged in sharing how they think we can improve the coordination between cultural heritage professionals and armed forces to protect heritage during and after a conflict. One of the more common answers was to conduct multidisciplinary training where co-learning can be fostered. Others including local stakeholders, municipality directors, in partnerships. LK, you had a lot of agreement in all your answers, also through the audience. Some of them also mentioned gradually create opportunities for exchange by organizing talks, capacity building workshops, and so on. We also have including heritage knowledge in armed forces training itself, fostering collaboration and involving armed forces in heritage documentation and assessment. I'm just going to skim through a few, and when, this PDF will also be shared with our panelists and audience, hopefully, to see more in detail. Provide joint training, as we already said, and intercommunication between institutions and joint workshops, which was the most common answer. The next one was what role heritage professionals can play in integrating cultural heritage into disaster risk reduction, peace building, and sustainable development. Some of them do feel that we have a big role on this, but we are not aware of exactly how we can. A few also mentioned role of educators, peacekeepers, mediators, consultants, etc. Some also mentioned that we can show some evidence on how heritage contributes to government's larger goals, such as climate action and disaster risk management. They can also be involved in policies and contingency or emergency plans that could be adopted by the government officials. And we have awareness and training. We have mainstreaming heritage values and attributes and relevant planning informants into relevant disaster planning frameworks, including spatial planning, midterm budget systems, agency agreements, and so on. For the disaster resilience scorecard, we did ask them if they've used it before, but the highest answer is even though they haven't heard about it before, but they are very interested to use so the link in information regarding the scorecard is posted in the chat, and we will repost it now for all the audience who were able to go in and out of the Zoom room during this panel. What do you think are the biggest challenge in coordinating multiple agencies to protect cultural heritage during emergency? And this was a question that the audience joined Yasna in answering. And according to them, it is usually conflicting priorities, as Yasna also mentioned, lack of clear roles, communication barriers, limited resources, and some others. And hopefully we will be able to address these. We do have 2 questions through the Mentimeter and 6 more through the Zoom chat. So I'll hand back over to Aparna and maybe we can address them one by one.
Yes, thank you, Juhi. But I would like to address the elephant in the room, and it's my bad. I was thinking my panel has become too big, but yes, never too big to have a voice of communities. It's because READY does want to reach out to communities. And it says that in this panel, clearly there is no representative communities with lived experiences. Is that true? Are we not part of a community with lived experiences? Anyone? Anyhow, this is an important aspect, and I would like to ask all of the panelists if anyone has to offer how in ways in which we can increase community engagement and, of course, lived experiences. ICCROM's FAR has been working with communities in frontline areas. And although we have some insights, but it would be great if we can draw on our panels, the wealth of experience that our panel has and panelists have. So if you can, speaking to the communities you come from, go on, Armenia, please.
Yes, because I think that probably it's a matter of jargon. Well, the involvement of I think we all think that involvement of communities it's fundamental, but we still are dealing with cultural heritage protection. So it's very important, and especially in an emergency, that what is done, it is done with the proper knowledge of the consequence of our action. So it is a matter of jargon, because when we mention the civil protection mechanism and how the activities connected to the civil protection mechanism, we are exactly talking about involvement, engagement of volunteers coming from the local community engaged in the preparedness and recovery measures. I've seen with my eyes people from the community, for instance, building with their own hands some protection against flood, which was imminent in a city in Austria under the civil protection mechanism. So we think it's important to engage the local community, but it should be done properly and using a very well assessed and tested methodology.
Thank you, Armina. Thank you for that. Yasna, you have been working a lot, and you recently we conducted a vulnerability and capacity assessment with you in your Tragir city with citizens. So, what do you have to say?
I think these activities are really important because in both cases the community is the first responder, right? And so through workshops with the citizens, you actually build trust. That's the one thing. It's not just that you can rely on them to actually show up and with a sense of, or at least some minimal training, so that there is no additional damage to the cultural or artifacts during this very urgent need to save things. But the second thing is that they need to trust that you're going to protect their interests as well. So one of the things that we did using Insight, which is another ICCROM's tool, at one point, art historians, of course, have their own set of criteria when deciding what priorities are or what is the most valuable thing or what should be rescued first. But that should be checked with the community as well, because, I've been fortunate enough that I work and live in a very homogeneous environment and community where our set of priorities was confirmed by the community. But these things should be discussed very openly. And the most important thing, I think, is to preserve what is part of the identity and what is felt as most valuable by the community. And if this can be, if there are differences in views from the professional perspective and the community's perspective, these should be kind of negotiated so that everything is kind of, let's say, addressed in a very transparent way. And then the drills and simulations are also very safe way of actually exposing the vulnerabilities or weaknesses of a system which you have in place. And then you can address this, in peace times. And just having, for instance, in this latest event, the firefighters who started evacuating part of this monastery, which was a private quarters and private collection, not cultural heritage. But the first thing that they started evacuating before I came to the scene were paintings and pictures owned by the priest living there. It wasn't the brand new TV, which is something that they would have done prior to, you know, the workshops that we've done, because this is their obligation to start evacuating property. But then this sense of what is more valuable, what cannot be replaced and what can be replaced is something that is now, after all the workshops, imprinted kind of in all of our heads. And of course, what we learned from both the citizens is how the space is used and what is more vulnerable in a times of crisis, where you have, you know, people with less ability to move, which places are vacant or more vulnerable to different types of risks. We had children included, for instance, in some of the workshops where we did a scenario like a tabletop discussion if there was an earthquake and then flooding and all sorts of multi-hazard scenarios, which I think that that's something we need to understand the risk, the nature of each risk specifically, but then prepare for a multi-hazard scenario. And to just listen to the kids who, you know, came to conclusions, so we're an island, maybe we should have more firefighting boats. So maybe we should tell the mayor to actually, you know, invest more in the public fire brigade, because the public fire brigade is the first responder in both, you know, cases of fire or flooding, even an earthquake. And another thing that I would say, which I don't think that most of these activities are high cost. I think that with the existing resources, with a little bit of will, there's a lot that can be done to actually make change on the ground. And the second thing is that it's a very, I don't know how else to put it, a satisfying process, because what you put into it, you get kind of back multiplied. You know, you have this integration within the community that kind of helps you in all kinds of different situations and can rely on you and doesn't see you as somebody who just, you know.
Thanks, Yasna. Thanks. I'm sorry, you were giving us very valuable insight.
I'm sorry, I could be talking about it for this.
No, but I think what you said, the essence of what you said is very important, about having trust and having clear communication lines and working with communities in peace times and not relying on them to come and save heritage, but having a two-way relationship. So I think that's very important. Also something what Armenia said. And now I actually would like to have one question, which I think there is by Rosario Montes. Rosario, you could actually open your own mic to speak, but I'm going to just say the question aloud just to keep the, to save the time. Because funding regime are politically led and therefore there is no connection to local priorities or what communities, oh no, not this one. Why is it difficult to, why is it difficult to access funds and institutional support to generate reconstruction projects on necessary studies? Anyone from the panel? Go on, okay. Funding.
Well, you can always get in touch with Elif. I mean, I don't know the person who asked the question or what type of institution she works for. And I do think it has been within the sector quite difficult since, like what I said earlier, it's a sector which is traditionally underfunded. But I also think we have to acknowledge that over the last decade or so, there's been quite a lot of new organizations created that are there to do exactly this, funding projects for local NGOs, for local civil society organizations. And we are one of them, especially if you're in conflict or other forms of crisis. But there is the British Cultural Protection Fund, there is SARE. We do have, you know, multiple types of bodies who provide that kind of funding. And I think the trick is for local NGOs to keep track of the websites of these key organizations when they open calls and to apply or to get in touch with them directly in case of acute emergencies. And definitely I can only speak for myself, not for the other organizations, but whenever there is an emergency, we are very happy to help. So it's just a matter of reaching out and I think there are ways to get funding.
Thank you, Elke. Thank you for that. And there's another question Can any panel member address critical aspects that must be kept in mind in the conduct of testing of response plans to crises at heritage sites? Anyone? You let it go.
Want me to give you a quick answer? Not so much about testing, but I think, and maybe I answer some of the community question there too. I think the development of an emergency plan, and I may have used the jargon, but the development of an emergency plan is a process. It's not a document, because I can write these documents in half an hour if I have to. I can put it into ChatGPT and turn something out. This is not the point. The point is to go through a process with everyone who has to be involved. And that community, I think, can be defined in many different ways, depending on where you are and what type of institution you are, what type of site you are. But everybody who has a role to play has to be involved while you're developing this. So the testing, as it were, should be part of the process as you go along. You involve people, you do simulations, you do tests of different parts of your plan. So by the time there is something that comes out in writing, you actually should have an operational system. I think that's the essence of it. Because to just put stuff on paper, to put it on a shelf and tick off the box that you have a plan, that's not going to help your risk preparedness.
Yeah. Absolutely, I agree. And it's not about something, a document that is to be kept on a shelf, but it's something that's living and that's part of a system. And what Stefan was saying initially, integrated risk management, that's what we are aiming for. And the integration is what remains a problem. And I don't want to end with a problem. So very quickly, I would invite our panelists to just say one sentence each to sum up this panel, and we move on to the next part of the agenda of this launch event. I'd start with Hee-Gyong Yoo.
Thank you very much, Sharpana. One sentence.
One sentence.
It could be a little bit long, but I just want to stress highlight about this importance of the uncertainty network, the initiative, because we are supporting these urban resilience issues with other different cities and communities, and we support. They have the very sound and ground basis for the assessment and the current status to integrate cultural heritage protection and other different thematic areas. So sorry to make it long, but yeah, importance of the urban resilience and making cities resilient altogether. Thanks.
Thank you, Gyong. Armenia.
Well, looking forward, you know that, let's say, bottom-up and top-down normally needs to meet at a certain point. So we, as Ministry of Culture, will continue to provide the legal and policy parachute that was also requested to also for the ground grassroots action to work. We always raise those elements, those points, and those issues as much as we can. We did it with the G20 culture. We did it with the G7 culture. So Italy is very active in promoting those principles, and also I think it's very important that at EU level this is clearly defined, because the EU plays a very important role for the member states, especially in setting the framework, the governance, and the methodology to act in terms of the emergency. So we will stay committed as we have always been.
Thank you, and thank you for that. We rely on that. We move to Alvaro. Alvaro, would you like to sum up the discussion? And
yes, for me, working here in the field, I think we are not the phrase maybe is we are not prepared as a community for the kind of climate events that are happening now and will happen more in the future. For me, this is the question. Thank you.
Thank you. And Christina? Are we ready?
Yeah, so to me, the issue here, at least in Valencia, this flash flood that we had, is prevention was lacking. So I would suggest to try to strengthen the links between science and policy making to make it real that the evidence arrives to society. So here I remember my street when the water was coming. Young people were taking photos, nice pictures, videos, recording videos. Old people were very scared. Old people knew what was going to happen, and young generations didn't know that. It is also in my town, which is very small, there are two ancient buildings, two old buildings. One is the town hall, what was formerly a primary school, and the second one is the church. These two buildings are not on the ground floor, but you have to go some stairs, so the ground floor is elevated. They have no suffered at all. But the rest of buildings, they all have basements. One level of basement, two levels of basement. And the problem with this flash flood, there was no time to react. So it came so suddenly, the level of water grows so suddenly that even though you have a first floor where you could save objects, there was no time for reaction. People had to save their lives. So please, prevention is the thing that I would suggest.
Prevention and learn from the past. With that, I move to Lucia, and then Stefan and Elke. And Jasna later on.
I will be very short. I hope that we can strengthen more the collaboration between the emergency situation department at local level and national level, civil protection and cultural heritage specialists in, let's say, implementing more instruments actually in a interdisciplinarity and community-based approach. So it is very important, and I'm very glad that a participant brought in discussion the importance of the community and what actually from the cultural heritage it is important for the local communities.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucia. Stefan?
Yes. Well, since the purpose of this meeting is very early days of your project, I thought I'd throw out some of the big ideas I think have emerged from the discussion. One is that case studies are incredibly important for training people because they're believable and because they tell a story. And the story can be local, it can be the community narrative. So case studies that are real are incredibly important for training professionals. The issue of communities versus policy from above, I think Amina clarified it very nicely, but I would just remind people, David Graeber's book on how civilization emerged, it doesn't always get to be hierarchical. There's always a tension between the elite hierarchy and the communities that actually implement things. And so there is that tension which needs to be addressed. And that's where I think local stories and case studies can do that. And the third thing is, just looking at World Economic Forum, sustainability is out, regeneration is in. Generation Y and Z consumers find the notion of sustainability too passive. They want regenerative businesses and they buy from those businesses now. Regeneration is the current buzzword. I think it's more than a buzzword. It's a good concept. If you think about risk management, disaster preparedness, sustainability, they're all very passive words in a sense. And regeneration feels positive. So I don't know how it could work, but if that can be worked into the way you think about disaster preparedness, it's much more positive. It involves the community and so on.
Thank you, Stefan. You've just given us something else to struggle with, regeneration, and grow to the growing list of terminology. But for sure, I do see the point that you make, that it's not something so passive as disaster risk management.
I think resilience was successful because it was a break towards a positive word. Resilience is positive.
Yes, and draws on some of what you're saying. With that, Jasna, over to you. I think you're the last one, but keep it short, please.
Yes, I think, I would just like to repeat what Herminia said at one point, that the cost of inaction is far greater than the cost of action. And at first, all the information, all the things that need to be done feel totally overwhelming. But then you take one step at a time, break it into small, initiatives and projects. And all you need is actually just a partner in a different field, and then you can move mountains. So I think that we should all take action. And I hope that this project will make far great change. And I wish everybody, a successful launch of the project and all the activities.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I could not thank this panel enough for all your valuable contribution, discussions, insights. And I can just say that we aim to build on these discussions, and we hope to make this an inclusive initiative, and if nothing else, an honest one. Thank you so much. And I hand over to Mohana now, and I think we are in for a short break. So perhaps it's to Juhi. Juhi, over to you.
Thank you, Aparna. Yes, we are indeed in for a short break, very well deserved, a 5-minute break. And after that, we will have a quick presentation on sharing what Ready is all about, the important timelines, what we're going to do when, and ways that you can be engaged with us. So do stick around, maximum 5-minute break, and then Mohana will take over. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm sorry that I cut the break short as we are running a bit late. But the moment we have all been waiting for is here. Let's unveil the Ready project with a short video, and I hope you all will enjoy. Thank you once again to everyone for joining us today and for this very special moment. I hope you enjoyed the video that aimed to capture the essence of what we are gathered here today for, the official launch of our READY project. READY is a collaborative effort to safeguard cultural heritage from the increasing threats of disasters, extreme weather events, and complex emergencies. It seeks to integrate cultural heritage protection into disaster risk management to safeguard both heritage sites and its associated communities. The project will focus on building the capacity of professionals and communities across Europe and beyond. Over 38 months, READY will carry out comprehensive trainings focused on movable, immovable, and intangible heritage. It will include online mentoring, immersive hands-on training to ensure real-world application. It will be enhanced with simulation exercises to help participants practice their skills in disaster resilience. There will be field projects where participants will be implementing field action in their countries addressing local challenges. These projects will document traditional knowledge and enhance community resilience. READY will connect heritage professionals, disaster risk experts, emergency responders, and policymakers to promote collaboration, and the project will advocate for integrating cultural heritage protection into broader resilience frameworks. By the end of this project, we aim to train 45 to 50 professionals in movable, immovable, and intangible heritage protection, establish a sustainable network of 20 to 25 trainers to support long-term knowledge transfer, implement 20 to 25 field projects focused on disaster preparedness, emergency response, and community-based risk reduction, and share the successful practices and lessons learned through an online conference and digital publications to inform policy and practice at regional and national levels. You can join us in this initiative. READY invites various stakeholders to join the project and contribute to its success. You can join us by becoming an organizing partner to host one of READY's regional training program. You can become a technical partner to share knowledge, tools, and best practices to enrich READY's curriculum and resources. And you can become a participating country. We invite diverse professionals, communities from countries which are participating in the Creative Europe program. And in order to join us, I request you to scan this code and fill a short form, which will allow us to register your interest in joining the READY initiative as a partner. Or you can also write to us at far_program@ICCROM.com. I will keep this slide on for a few more seconds and hand it over to Aparna for the final closing remarks. Thank you once again for joining, and I hope you had engaging and interesting time joining us for this launch event.
Thank you, Mohana. If there are any questions, we can take one or two pressing questions. There is a question in the chat: who are the Creative Europe participating countries? We can certainly provide you with a list if you can give us your email. Are there any other questions that we can address about participation in READY? If not, then I would like to thank everyone for their active collaboration, all the attendees. First of all, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all of our panelists for their invaluable contributions today. Your expertise and insights are truly appreciated and have made this discussion richer and more impactful. You have also flagged several issues for us, several topics that we will be carefully exploring, and we count on your expertise and advice as we go through planning READY, and we invite all of our attendees to join us in one way or the other. A special thank you to our READY partners, the European Commission's Directorate General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture, DGAC, and the Creative Europe program of the European Union. Your support has been instrumental in making this initiative a reality, and we hope that it realizes its potential, and we are grateful for your continued commitment to safeguarding cultural heritage. Finally, I would like to thank all of our attendees for joining us today, giving us comments, participating in the polls. Your engagement and perspectives are essential to advancing the dialogue on how we can better protect cultural heritage in times of crisis. We value each and every opinion here, and we will take careful note of some of the comments which were about inclusivity, about including other professionals, opening the training. We hope to address all of these issues within the framework of this project, but also respecting Creative Europe program's goals and supporting them. We will be working with them, and we hope to make this project an inclusive and an inspiring project. We look forward to continuing this important conversation together. Thank you once again for joining us. Wishing you all a productive day ahead. Thank you very much.